Hi everybody. So this video is to continue our novel study that we started before spring break. It was probably just after Christmas, I think we started this. So the Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. So you should have your white novel study book ready to go in front of you because that's what we always did. We always like to sequence the story as we go, as I'm reading it. So you'll be drawing and or writing down any new character names. And I will try and stop and spell those out for you if you'd like to continue writing those names into your sequence boxes. So pause the video if you need to catch on to your novel study duotang. It should be in your bag from school. And then we'll continue on. Okay, good. So let's do a little catch up. Where were we? Just before spring break, we were learning about Edward being rescued from that ocean that he was laying in for quite a long time. And the fisherman got him and brought him home to Nellie, his wife. And Nellie fell in love with Edward Tulane, but she didn't know Edward was Edward, and she didn't know Edward was a boy. So she turned the bunny into Susanna. So if that's new for you, go ahead and write that name down. Edward became Susanna in this household for his journey he is on. So that's the picture of him as Susanna, all dressed in a really pretty frilly dress. Okay, so let's carry on. How happy Nellie was. And the last bit of that chapter, we'll just read the last little bit. Let's see here. Sometimes, though, staring up at the night sky, Edward remembered Pellegrina, saw again her dark and glowing eyes, and a chill would go through him. Warthogs, he would think, witches. But Nellie, before she put him to bed each night, sang Edward a lullaby, a song about a mockingbird that did not sing, and a diamond ring that would not shine. And the sound of Nellie's voice soothed the rabbit, and he forgot about Pellegrina. Life for a very long time was sweet. And then Lawrence and Nellie's daughter came for a visit. And we know when that happens at the end of a chapter, something new is going to happen for Edward. So we're going to start chapter 10 today. That's where our new journey starts. And there's a picture of an old-fashioned wooden high chair. What do you think might be happening? He's in Susanna's house with Lawrence. And the daughter is coming for a visit, so she must be able to drive and get there, so she must be older, so she doesn't live in the house with them anymore. So the baby high chair, what do you think might be happening here? Let's carry on. Lolly was the daughter's name. Lolly, L-O-L-L-Y, was a lumpy woman who spoke too loudly and who wore too much lipstick. She entered the house and immediately spotted Edward sitting on the living room couch. "What's this?" she said. She put down her suitcase and picked Edward up by one foot. She held him upside down. "That's Susanna," said Nellie. "Susanna!" shouted Lolly, and she gave Edward a shake. His dress was up over his head, and he could see nothing. Already he had formed a deep and abiding hatred for Lolly. "Your father found her," said Nellie. "She came up in a net, and she didn't have no clothes on, so I made her some dresses." "Have you gone skivvy?" shouted Lolly. "Rabbits don't need clothes." "Well," said Nellie, and her voice shook, "this one seemed to." Lolly tossed Edward back on the couch. He landed face down with his arms over his head and his dress still over his face, and he stayed that way through dinner. "Why have you got out that old high chair?" shouted Lolly. "Oh, don't pay it no mind," said Nellie. "Your father was just gluing on a missing piece, wasn't you, Lawrence?" "That's right," said Lawrence, without looking up from his plate. Of course, after dinner, Edward did not go outside and stand beneath the stars to have a smoke with Lawrence. And Nellie, for the first time since Edward had been with her, did not sing him a lullaby. In fact, Edward was ignored and forgotten about. until the next morning when Lolly picked him up again and pulled his dress down away from his face and stared him in the eye. "Got the old folks bewitched, don't you?" said Lolly. "I heard the talk in town that they've been treating you like a rabbit child." Edward stared back at Lolly. Her lipstick was a bright and bloody red. He felt a cold breeze blow through the room. Was a door open somewhere? "Well, you don't fool me," she said. She gave him a shake. "We'll be taking a trip together, you and me." Holding Edward by the ears, Lolly marched into the kitchen and shoved him face down into the garbage can. "Ma," Lolly shouted, "I'm taking the truck and I'm going to head on out and do some errands." "Oh," came Nellie's voice, "that's wonderful, dear. Goodbye then." "Goodbye," thought Edward as Lolly hauled the garbage out to the truck. "Goodbye," Nellie called again and louder this time. Edward felt a sharp pain somewhere deep inside his china chest. For the first time, his heart called out to him. It said 2 words, "Nellie, Lawrence." End of chapter 10. They're short chapters, aren't they, boys and girls? Well, that Lolly lady certainly wasn't a very friendly lady to Lawrence, and she's taken him away from the house. So here's Edward's journey continuing. Chapter 11. Let me show you the picture of chapter 11. Oh, there's Edward, also known as Susanna. Looks like, what do you think? Where is he? Yeah, that's right. He's on the top of a garbage dump. Oh, no. Well, that's certainly no place for our fine rabbit, Edward Tulane. Let's see what happens. Edward ended up at the dump. He lay on top of orange peels and coffee grounds and rancid bacon and rubber tires. The first night he was at the top of the garbage heap, and so he was able to look up at the stars and find comfort in their light. In the morning, a short man came climbing through the trash and the rubble. He stopped when he was standing on top of the highest pile. He put his hand under his armpits and flapped his elbows. And the man crowed loudly, and he shouted, "Who am I? I'm Ernest, Ernest, who is king of the world." "How can I be king of the world?" "Because I am king of garbages, and garbages is what the world is made of. Ha, 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 ha. Therefore, I'm Ernest, Ernest, who is king of the world," he crowed again. Edward was inclined to agree with Ernest's assessment of the world being made of garbage, especially after his second day at the dump, when a load of trash was deposited directly on top of him. He lay there, buried alive. He could not see the sky. He could not see the stars. He could see nothing. What kept Edward going, what gave him hope, was thinking of how he would find Lolly and exact his revenge. He would pick her up by the ears. He would bury her under a mountain of trash. But after almost 40 days and nights had passed, the weight and the smell of the garbage above and below clouded Edward's thoughts, and soon he gave up thinking about revenge and gave in to sadness. It was worse, much worse than being buried at sea. It was worse because Edward was a different rabbit now. He couldn't say how he was different. He just knew that he was. He remembered again Pellegrina's story about the princess who had loved nobody. The witch turned into a warthog because she loved nobody. He understood that now. He heard Pellegrina say, "You disappoint me." "Why?" he asked her. "Why do I disappoint you?" But he knew the answer to the question. It was because he had not loved Abilene enough. And now she was gone from him, and he would never be able to make it right. And Nellie and Lawrence were gone too. He missed them terribly. He wanted to be with them. The rabbit wondered if that was love. Day after day passed, and Edward was aware of time passing only because every morning he could hear Ernest performing his dawn ritual, cackling and crowing about being king of the world. On his 180th day at the dump, salvation arrived for Edward in a most unusual form. The garbage around him shifted, and the rabbit heard the sniffing and panting of a dog. Then came the frenzied sound of digging. The garbage shifted again, and suddenly, miraculously, the beautiful buttery light of late afternoon shone on Edward's face. What do you think happened there? That's the end of chapter 10. Who is Ernest, I wonder? What's this dog doing digging on the garbage pile? 180 days. That was a long time. And we know Edward likes the stars and he likes to look up at them. And again, he couldn't see them. Well, let's take a look at chapter 12. Chapter 12. There's the dog, and there is Susanna. Or is it Edward? I wonder, what do you think? Take a good look. Well, let's read on and see what his next journey will be. So this is chapter 12. Edward did not have much time to savor the light, for the dog suddenly appeared above him, dark and shaggy, blocking his view. Edward was pulled out of the garbage by his ears, dropped, and then picked up again, this time around the middle and shaken back and forth with a great deal of ferocity. The little dog growled deep in its throat and then dropped Edward again and looked him in the eye. Edward stared back. "Hey, get out of here, you dog!" It was Ernest, king of garbages and therefore king of the world. The dog grabbed Edward by his pink dress and took off running. "That's mine! That's mine! All garbages is mine!" Ernest shouted. "You come back here!" But the little dog did not stop. The sun was shining, and Edward felt exhilarated. Who, having known him before, would have thought that he could be so happy now, crusted over with garbage, wearing a dress, held in the slobbery mouth of a dog, and being chased by a madman? But he was happy. The dog ran and ran until they reached a railroad track. They crossed over the tracks, and there, underneath a scraggly tree, in a circle of bushes, Edward was dropped in front of a large pair of feet. The dog began to bark. Edward looked up and saw that the feet were attached to an enormous man with a long, dark beard. "What's this, Lucy?" said the man. He bent and picked up Edward. He held him firmly around the middle. "Lucy," said the man, "I know how much you enjoy rabbit pie." Lucy barked. So now we know the name of the dog. The dog is Lucy. "Yes, yes, I know. Rabbit pie is a true delight, one of the pleasures of our existence." And Lucy let out a hopeful yip. "And what we have here, what you have so graciously delivered to me, is definitely a rabbit. But the best chef in the world would be hard-pressed to make this into a pie." Lucy growled. "This rabbit is made of china, girl." The man held Edward closer to him. They looked each other in the eye. "You're made of china, aren't you, Malone?" He gave Edward a playful shake. "You are some child's toy, am I right? And you have been separated somehow from the child who loves you." Edward felt again this sharp pain in his chest. He thought of Abilene. He saw the path leading up the house on Egypt Street. He saw the dusk descending and Abilene running toward him. Yes, Abilene had loved him. "So, Malone," said the man. He cleared his throat. "You are lost. That is my guess. Lucy and I are lost too." At the sound of her name, Lucy let out another yip. "Perhaps," said the man, "you would like to be lost with us. I have found it much more agreeable to be lost in the company of others. My name is Bull. Lucy, as you may have surmised, is my dog. Would you care to join us?" Bull waited for a moment and staring at Edward, and then with his hand still firmly around Edward's waist, the man reached one enormous finger up and touched Edward's head from behind. He pushed it so it looked as if Edward were nodding his head in agreement. "Look, Lucy, he's saying yes," said Bull. "Malone has agreed to travel with us. Isn't that swell?" Lucy danced around Bull's feet, wagging her tail and barking. And so it was that Edward took to the road with a hobo and his dog. So that's the end of that chapter. We're going to stop there today. I'll show you, as I always do in class, the picture of the next chapter, what's coming next. Well, chapter 13, there it is. This is the man with the beard. Here's the man with the beard. And there's Edward, also known as Susanna, now also known as Malone. That's what Bull named him, Malone. M-A-L-O-N-E, Malone. Looks like he's on a backpack of some kind. And so Bull is carrying him around. Bull seems to be a very nice man. So you might ask the question at the end of the chapter there. He said, and so it was that Edward took to the road with a hobo and his dog. So there's the last sentence. A hobo. Do you know what a hobo is? You can look it up, and I can tell you that a hobo is just a man. It's an old-fashioned term for a homeless person. And this was made, remember, probably about 100 years ago, our book. So this story involves about 100 years ago, and they were called hobos back then. They were usually men that traveled and wandered and picked up odd jobs here and there. So that's what a hobo is, H-O-B-O, if you would like to take a look at that somewhere. And we always talk about that in class whenever I read it out loud. So I'm really curious to find out about Malone in the back now of our friend Bull and his trusty companion Lucy, who we've already met, right? So I hope you enjoy writing or drawing in our sequencing chart about that. And Edward Tulane, he's missing all of you. Remember Edward? So he's missing all of you. And so I hope you enjoyed our little read today, and I'll read some more for you tomorrow, okay? So enjoy. Have a good day, guys. Miss you. Bye-bye.